In the last video, I discussed the similarities between the foolish man in James chapter 2 and the disciples in Matthew 17. In this video, I will dive deep into the original text in order to show that although the size of the mustard seed is relevant, the plain reading, however, renders an application that is focused on the aspect of the seed here, and its relative small size is a secondary consideration. All that and more coming up. Hey there, it's Jeremy Grogan with Position Studios, a ministry aimed at building a community of believers who are positioned to take the message of Christ to others and to model him everywhere. This is the 6th video in my series titled Position Through Faith Part 1. Links to the entire video series are provided in the description. Also, remember to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss any videos in the series. As we closed out the last video, I ended with the discussion about kokos. We defined it as a grain, a kernel, or a seed. I really wanted to understand the wording that is connecting faith to this mustard seed. Jesus says, if you have faith as a mustard seed. The word translated as is the Greek adverb hos. Hos is used in comparison, meaning according as or in the same manner as, but it also assumes the same nature of purpose, of time, and of consequence. This is interesting because we can observe the following connection: of purpose and of time being seed time, and of consequence being the harvest. Concluding this study, I believe the translation could be stated as follows: if you have faith as, or in the same way, a grain of mustard has faith. The translation provided here is from the AUV, which is the author's unauthorized amplified version. The closest English translation I could find states it like this: if you have faith like a mustard seed. Matthew 17:20 from the Weymouth New Testament. Let's really think about this. Jesus is suggesting that if we have faith the same way a mustard seed has faith, we could move a mountain from one place to another. In fact, not only is Jesus saying a mustard seed has faith, by implication, he is suggesting that the mustard seed has faith and the disciples do not at this relative point in New Testament chronology. By now, readers may be asking, how is all of this significant and what does it mean? The order and construction of the original text is significant for several reasons that I will now discuss. The first is that some older translations, such as the King James Version, the 1599 Geneva Bible, and the ASV, record the phrase, as a grain of mustard seed. This is not necessary and would be like saying, as a grain of mustard grain, or as a seed of mustard seed. However, kokos only occurs once in the passage, and it should be read as a grain of mustard, or as a mustard seed. In the original chapter of the book, I provide a footnote for Figure 1, which I will read as follows. Figure 1 is a Greek to English interlinear view of the text that shows the order of words as they appear in the TR, or the Textus Receptus. The first level shows the AB strong reference. The second is the Greek lexical form. Third shows the Greek to English transliteration. And the fourth is the English translation. As you can see here, it clearly says, if you have faith as a grain of mustard. Translations that I believe render this passage correctly include the Weymouth New Testament, New King James, Young's Literal Translation, the Modern English Version, and the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. The redundant use of both grain and seed, as shown in some of the older versions mentioned, can lead readers to interpret that the first mention of the word grain indicates an emphasis on the size of the mustard seed, when in fact the seed is the focus of the illustration based on the plain presentation of the text. Unfortunately, we observe an ill side effect of this in many other translations. The following are 5 of the more significant cases where we observe interpretation rather than translation. The NIV reads, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed. The New Living reads, if you have faith even as small as a mustard seed. The Passion reads, if you have faith inside of you no bigger than the size of a small mustard seed. The Good News translation reads, if you have faith as big as a mustard seed. I provide a footnote about this translation as follows. Quote, I must say, This one is very odd. I don't understand how the translators arrived to this choice of words. End quote. And finally, the New English translation reads, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. Also, here I provide a footnote as follows. Quote, here we observe the actual word size, while the others make some sort of reference to a certain size. End quote. Please stay tuned as we take a short commercial break. Thanks for watching and welcome back, everybody. Let's continue. These passages provide a great segue into how I think many traditionally look at this portion of Scripture. I think many people have been led to believe that if we had an amount of faith the size of a tiny object, that we could move an enormous mountain with the power of our mind in an instantaneous manner with little effort. Since this has never been achieved in all of human history, this interpretation must lead supporters to conclude one of two things. One, not one person has ever had faith at all. Or two, the interpretation is completely wrong. While I would agree that the seed's small size is a metaphorical and applicable component of this kind of faith, the seed aspect is clearly the foundation of this teaching. The size aspect of the seed represents the requirement to enter this kind of faith, the fact that it even exists at all. But in order to manifest the fruits of faith, there is an advanced component known as endurance, which is demonstrated by a seed. When nurtured and developed over time, the small seed will, without doubt, become a massive tree. But this doesn't happen overnight. Let me take a small sidestep just for a moment and bring in a super important concept that I think can help clear things up for those who may be having a hard time tracking. On a few occasions, we observe Jesus say, "O you of little faith." He says this in Matthew chapter 8, verse 26, Matthew chapter 14, verse 31, and Matthew chapter 16, verse 8. The whole phrase is derived from two words, the Greek adjective oligos, meaning small or little, and yep, you guessed it, pistis, which is faith. Together, they form the Greek feminine noun oligopistos, which means having little faith. This word is used in Matthew chapter 14, verse 31, just after Peter walked on the water but began to sink when he saw the strong wind and waves. Jesus says, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Let's really think about this for a moment. If Matthew 17:20 is referring to a little speck of faith and suggesting that just a little faith could move a mountain at that very moment, then why would Jesus link Peter's doubt to little faith? Based on the contemporary understanding of mustard seed faith, Peter's trace amount of faith should have produced the opposite of him sinking. In fact, Peter not only should have been able to walk continuously on the water, he probably should have been able to fly. Moreover, during my initial study of Matthew 17, I couldn't figure out where, why, and how the size aspect of mustard faith became the overwhelming basis for this teaching. But after probing a few cross-references and commentaries, I noticed that it is clearly influenced by an earlier portion of Matthew. Matthew chapter 13 in the New King James states, starting in verse 31, "Another parable he put forth to them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field." Verse 32, "Which is indeed the least of all the seeds, but when it is grown, it is greater than the herbs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches." This brings us to the end of the 6th video in the series. Please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. Thanks for watching, and remember, many are called, but you are positioned.